Hello, folks. Welcome back to yet another edition of Straight Talk with Obert Gutu on YouTube. Today, we touch on another interesting topic of the role of former liberation parties or movements in the new Africa that we want to create. The question is, are former liberation movements still relevant in today's politics, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa? As you know, there are about 4 or 5 former liberation movements that are still in power at this part of the world. In Zimbabwe here, we've got ZANU-PF. Across the border to the south, there is the African National Congress, ANC of South Africa. In Mozambique, there's Frelimo of Mozambique. There's MPLA in Angola. There is SWAPO in Namibia. There is also the Chama Pinduzi in Tanzania. And there is a school of thought that says, no, these are all parties. They've since been overtaken by events and that they really have no role to play. But my own view is that we still need the former liberation movements as long as they are going to be able to evolve and move with the times. Because the danger of just saying we no longer need those former liberation movements, that they are now composed of old men and old women, is not really a sound argument, if you ask me. Because I believe that when you look at the history of those former liberation movements, most of them really have actually a solid history of Pan-Africanism, a solid history of fighting for the African cause. And of course, there have been allegations of corruption involving most of these former liberation movements that have now evolved into ruling parties in the various countries. You know that Chama Pinduzi has been in power in Tanzania ever since Tanzania got independent. The same applies to MPLA in Angola. The same applies to Frelimo in Mozambique. The same applies to ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe, and the same applies to SWAPO in Namibia, and even the same applies to the ANC of South Africa. So the issue is just not to say, okay, let's kick out these former liberation movements and replace them with the so-called younger political parties, because you notice that most of these so-called young political parties actually lack in ideological clarity. They are neoliberal movements. They invariably tend to play puppetry politics. And I personally have got serious issues with political parties that are puppet movements, that are puppet organizations. I would rather be, led by parties that are solidly Pan-Africanist in ideological, linkage. And in a way, we want to have a situation where we have political parties that are first and foremost Afrocentric, political parties that speak to African issues, that speak to the African agenda, so to speak. So it is not just easy to say, okay, these are now old men, these are now old women, and we should give way to the youth. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you are young, you're a good leader. Neither does it necessarily mean that if you are old, you're an experienced and wise leader. Because I believe that there's more to leadership than age. And some other people say age is just nothing but a number. So look, I believe that what these former liberation movements have to do really is to adjust, to move with the times. They call themselves revolutionary parties, so maybe what they have to do is to ensure that they revolutionize themselves internally, that they also recreate themselves, they move with the times. But it is important that they remain solidly anchored on the doctrine or the ideology of Pan-Africanism, because I believe that the moment that Africa then plays to either the whims of the East or the West or the North or the South, then we lose our identity as Africans. So my own prognosis, therefore, is that it is not just a good idea to say, okay, simply because these are now old men and old women in these former liberation movements, they should just be kicked out of power. Of course, there are allegations of corruption, but you also notice that there are also serious allegations of corruption, even in the so-called young opposition political parties, in particularly Southern Africa, which parties, unfortunately, tend to, like I say, to be puppet movements controlled from the Western capitals, Washington, D.C., London, Paris, etc. So I have serious problems with any movement that is a puppet movement. I would be comfortable with a situation where we have our own African politics being run by our own African agenda. So, okay, this is just a short video for today. Folks, have a good day. Enjoy yourselves. Work hard for yourself, for your family, for your country, for Africa, for the entire humanity. You can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Gutu Obert. You can also follow me on Facebook. My official Facebook page is Obert Gutu. You can also follow me on Instagram, Obert Gutu. You can also follow me on LinkedIn on LinkedIn. And like I said, look, I'm Obert Gutu. I'm the senior and founding partner of Gutu Attorneys at Law here in Harare, Zimbabwe, Southern Africa. I'm also the former Deputy Minister of Justice and Legal Affairs in the Republic of Zimbabwe. Cheerio, folks. Have a good day once again. Asante sana.